You're listening to Tomorrow's Energy, a podcast from Salix.
Coming up in this episode,
it is perfectly possible to deploy a heat pump now, make use of some of the available tariffs, and at least be cost competitive, possibly with a reduction.
Welcome to Tomorrow's Energy. I am Hannah Walker. In this series, we explore the innovations, technologies, and people driving the energy transition. My guest today is Bean Beanland, who's sector consultant for commercial, industrial, and public sector at the Heat Pump Association UK. Thank you for joining.
Thank you very much indeed.
I'm going to go straight in and ask the question: what's the difference between an air source heat pump and a ground source heat pump?
So we normally term heat pumps by the source of the energy. So an air source heat pump would, in most people's terminology, would be called an air to water heat pump. So it's taking energy from the air and putting it into water, which then circulates around your house or into your hot water cylinder. Ground source is technically ground to water. So it would be taking energy from the ground. That could be the aquifer, it could be deep boreholes, could be a horizontal array, and again, putting it into water, into your house, into a hydronic system, which is a wet-based system, so radiators, underfloor heating, etc. And then we have air-to-air heat pumps, which most people in the UK would refer to as air conditioning, which takes energy from the air and puts it into the building through some form of air delivery mechanism, usually high-level cassettes in offices or shops, retail, etc. We are not yet using air-to-air in a very significant way for space heating in homes, but it's increasingly being employed for cooling, of course.
Now, at Salix, I'm lucky enough to visit a lot of projects, and I see a lot of air source heat pumps, giant air source heat pumps, as well as ground source. I feel that I see more giant air source heat pumps, which are the kind of like industrial size heat pumps. But where does each pump work best?
So identifying what technology to put where is a question that is around technical function. So which type of technology, which typology of heat pump provides the most appropriate solution for the demands that we're seeing on a particular site. It's also influenced, of course, by budget and availability of natural resources around. So, for example, if you live on a river, you have a ready energy source sitting in the river, you could potentially make use of that. If you're limited for space, then air source obviously becomes the dominant technology. And in the UK, because of the density of buildings, the dominant technology by some distance at the moment is air source, either air to air or air to water. But we are going to see a massive increase in the deployment of heat networks in urban environments especially. And those heat networks will themselves be driven by heat pumps, big commercial devices, which could be driven by natural resources, which might be rivers, etc.
Do you think that we're being good enough at explaining to the general public, to all of us, the differences and the technologies required, and how is best to create homes and businesses and buildings that are sustainable for the future in terms of energy? Do you think we're good enough at that?
No, I don't think that messaging to consumers in general has been anything like good enough. And as a result, the sort of myth and legend has moved into the vacuum. Much of it is, of course, unhelpful. Government particularly needs to step up its role. We've currently got talk of them creating something called the Warm Homes Agency. One of the roles will be to improve the messaging. We still run a community engagement program, and getting out into communities and explaining the differences between the technologies, where they have a fit, how consumers avoid the pitfalls that you read about on the front pages of some of the broadsheets, how to avoid those issues. That is a key part of the messaging, in my view.
This is the Tomorrow's Energy podcast.
Talking about those issues, you've been obviously working in this area for quite some time. You're a real expert in this area, hence why we've asked you to come onto our podcast. But what lessons do you think are now emerging from the projects that we've seen in the past, if you were to sum that up?
I think that the key things to remember are that we've been through these big energy transitions before. None of us can really remember them because the last big one was the introduction of central heating. which started in the late 60s and then moved through the 70s and 80s. And it took 30 years to get to something like 85% penetration of central heating into homes in retrofit. Very few people today, homeowners of today, have actually been through that transition themselves because it was carried out by their parents and grandparents. So they've sort of forgotten what it took and how potentially disruptive and challenging that transition was. We're sort of being told that the transition we're about to go through, the energy transition as we decarbonize our society, is sort of new and scary. Actually, it isn't. So that's the first message I think we need to get across. And then we need to remind consumers that there is an element of due diligence here, that they do need to do some work and they're making a significant investment in their homes. If people are putting in, new kitchens, for example, and new bathrooms, then they'll probably do a lot of market research. They'll go and visit various suppliers who would, talk to them about colors, shapes, drawers, cupboards, what does it. We need to do a similar amount of due diligence ourselves in our homes to make sure, first of all, that we're choosing the right technologies, and secondly, and critically, that we're choosing the right installers. And that is, I think, the biggest challenge for consumers at the moment, is identifying an installer who is going to first be technically capable, and second is going to look after them. And you only get that by sort of eyeballing people, in my view. You've got to stand in front of people and challenge them a little bit. Are they going to look after you, and do they really know their stuff?
We do have a bit of a skills shortage in this area, don't we, currently?
Yeah, I think that's probably another podcast, to be honest, because I would pull out my soapbox on education at this point. I think the whole skills piece doesn't start with tertiary education and apprenticeships. The skills piece, to me, starts in primary education. We need to start talking much more to young children about on-the-tools careers, particularly to girls. So, of course, we don't encourage into this sort of thing at all. So that's a whole additional topic. But you're right, selecting installers who have got technical capabilities is critically important. And one of the options that consumers can now use, Nesta charity, which operates in our world, they run something called Visit a Heat Pump, where you can go onto their website, put in your postcode. It will bring up a whole load of sites in your vicinity where homeowners have already been through the transition and would be prepared to welcome you in. You can go talk to them about their experiences, touch, feel, listen to the installation. And of course, they will tell you, was their installer any good? It's one of the ways of identifying who is doing good work in your area.
You've talked about the idea that we spend a lot of time when we refurbish our homes. Not all of us, but some of us spend a lot of time sourcing the right equipment, the right colors, as you say, if we're looking at installing kitchens, bathrooms, etc. And perhaps we're not so focused on how we're going to heat that area, how we're going to heat our homes. The thing that I'm hearing a lot is actually it's really costly to install.
Costs are fundamental, no doubt about it. And costs can be a challenge. It's one of the reasons why under the Warm Homes Plan, we are looking at Warm Homes Fund, which may provide additional top-up loans on top of the current grant scheme. But I think that lenders are increasingly getting the hang of providing low-cost green lending, either top-ups to mortgages, specialist green loans, there's cashbacks available. So we've got innovation in financing coming through. We may ultimately have things like heat as a service, where the consumer doesn't have any upfront costs at all, but pays by service. But I think the key here is that what homeowners want is comfort. They're not wedded to the technologies necessarily. What they want is comfort. And I think the key here is for our industry to make sure that we can integrate with all of the other electrical devices that are coming down the track. Bear in mind, we are electrifying everything. It's not just heating and cooling. So the home of the future will have, electric vehicles, battery storage, solar PV possibly, and a heat pump. And the key here is to reassure homeowners that there are solutions, software solutions, which will manage all that for them and provide them with optimized scenarios, and that it's not something that they will have to technically get their head around. Clearly one or two, a small minority will want to be able to manage things minutely, but the vast majority of people will want to be reassured, and that reassurance will almost certainly come through some form of third party who will make these things deliver optimized performance.
This is the Tomorrow's Energy podcast with Hannah Walker.
I'm one of these people at home who've got an old gas boiler, which is not very reliable and seems to take me out on the coldest times of the year, and then therefore you have no heating or hot water. So I think reliability is a really important question, isn't it? An issue for people too.
And we're frequently asking, well, what happens in the event of a power cut, for example? But of course, in the event of a power cut, most fossil fuel boilers won't run either because the circulation pumps aren't running and what have you. So this is where potentially storage, local energy storage, which could be batteries, but it could be thermal storage. So we are going to get much more used to storing energy in our own sites for future use. And that could be making use of flexibility. So we make use of low cost electricity when it's available. We store it locally. All these things are going to significantly change. Now, most people who will ultimately end up with an electric vehicle of some sort or other, that car will sit on the drive doing almost nothing for 80% of the time. That's a battery storage facility, and you would be able to buy electricity overnight on cheap rates and then use it during the day to run the home. So vehicle to home, which is the sort of technological advance that's going to make a real difference for people.
The big part of this picture is about reduce, as well as being better for the planet, obviously being more environmentally friendly and providing comfort, is the bills that we're facing. Is this, as far as you can say, and I'm not going to hold you to it, but can you see a way that these are going to reduce the impact on our bills?
I think there's no doubt that in the medium to long term, electrification is going to reduce energy costs. Pretty well universal acceptance that that's the case. Right now, the UK has historically high energy costs, both for gas and electricity, actually. Critically, we have high energy costs compared to almost every other developed nation on the planet. And there are various historic reasons how we've ended up in that situation. And it's taken a long time to get to that point, and it's going to take, some time to unravel that scenario. But fundamentally, there is now political consensus again on the price of electricity. Consensus around net zero may be fractured, but there seems to be consensus now about the price of electricity. I am hopeful that we will see some fundamental changes on the price of electricity. And of course, the key here in terms of will a transition to a heat pump reduce my costs? This is a key function of the relative price of gas and electricity in the UK. If this government and successive governments move to reduce the price of electricity because we are increasingly electrifying everything, consumers will see the benefit of that. It is perfectly possible to deploy a heat pump now, make use of some of the available tariffs, and at least be cost competitive, possibly with a reduction. Anybody who is in the position of being able to also deploy solar PV on the roof and maybe a battery and reduce their average price of electricity through those other technologies will absolutely be in a winning situation in terms of operational cost.
Thank you. You see, I wanted to end on that little positive note. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to Tomorrow's Energy, and a big thank you to Bean Beanland. Don't forget to look out for our next episode and join us as we continue exploring the ideas, innovations and people shaping our energy transition. Thank you to Bean for joining me today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Tomorrow's Energy, a podcast from Salix. For information about our work and more content, visit salixfinance.co.uk/podcasts.